We'll take a look at where we are and then make a determination on what needs to be next.
Tonight, follow-up to the news of charges against the former chief of the Thunder Bay Police Service and the unusual press conference that followed.
Then your agency or your organization is no longer relevant to the people for which it's supposed to serve.
More fallout for the Native Women's Association of Canada.
This volume really shows the accumulation of all of those decades of work and labor and love for our people.
And an anthology featuring over 24 Métis women scholars was released last week. Good evening, I'm Savannah Kelly. Welcome to APTN National News. A press conference today with the Thunder Bay Police Chief and the chair of the police board took some interesting twists. It was held to address charges laid last week against the former chief of police and other members of the service. But at one point, Chief Darcy Fleury had to explain an incident he was involved in while off duty last week, where he had to call police 3 times before getting backup. And a lawyer representing members of the service also disrupted the event and walked out. On Friday, the Ontario Provincial Police laid charges of obstruction and breach of trust against former Thunder Bay Police Chief Sylvie Hoth. 2 other members of the service are also facing charges as part of the same investigation. The new police chief and board chair are hoping the charges don't reflect poorly on the work they say is underway to regain trust and accountability. Lawyer Chantel Bryson, who represents numerous current and former members of the service, also disrupted the press conference and said the chief and board chair should be apologizing to those people who brought forward their concerns about the 3 who have been charged.
At this stage, I'm not sure what I'm apologizing for. We need to go through these processes to see what happens what the outcomes are. It's not a matter of it goes back to everything we're talking about. You can't just change overnight what has occurred in the past or what's perceived to have occurred in the past with a magic wand. So we have to go through the processes. Some of these processes are delayed because of procedures that have been filed, and that's just a matter of where that happens. So once that's all done, we'll take a look at where we are and make a determination on what needs to be next.
Meanwhile, Anishinaabe Aski Nation released a statement on the charges against the former police chief and others today. NAN says despite numerous reports, nothing has happened to enhance the public's trust in the TBPS, adding the issues plaguing the service are not resigned to history or the result of a few bad apples, but stem from systemic issues that have yet to be addressed. We will keep following this story for you. Over the past few weeks, the Native Women's Association of Canada has been in turmoil. Dozens of staff have been laid off, and a complaint to the Public Service Alliance of Canada alleges the layoffs were part of a union-busting campaign. Plus, it's had a significant part of its budget slashed by the federal government. Last Friday, the board of the national organization announced the departure of its CEO, Lynn Grew. Crystal Mariah Samaganis is a former employee. She believes Grew's time as CEO is why the organization is going through a rough patch. She hopes NWAC can go back to meeting the needs of Indigenous women.
It's the most important thing, because when you have elitism or a disconnect, then your agency or your organization is no longer relevant to the people for which it's supposed to serve. And that's what's been happening in recent years, that there's been a serious disconnect. So now I hope there's, new relationships. I hope there's new networks. I hope there's new programs.
Today was the opening of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. The 23rd annual event runs for 2 weeks. APTN's Angel Moore is there and brings us this report from day one.
I'm here in New York City. Behind me is the United Nations headquarters, where hundreds of Indigenous peoples from around the world have gathered in hopes that their concerns can be heard, including Ben Osau Samuel from Sudan.
Because over the years we have seen Indigenous peoples lacking education, lacking cultural values, lacking certain kind of respect and recognition from our government and our society. And we have all come to agreement that it's high time we understand the importance of Indigenous people.
The forum was established as an advisory body for Indigenous peoples at the United Nations. This year, the focus includes financing Indigenous peoples to protect the planet and address climate change, including protecting Indigenous rights. This led Nicholas Paul to travel all the way down from Sisdansik, Wolastoqey Nation, New Brunswick. Paul says Canada is ignoring treaty rights, especially right now when First Nations fishers are being arrested for harvesting.
The United Nations has the permanent forum on Indigenous issues right now, and one of the topics here is the criminalization of Indigenous rights. So it's perfect timing. We want to bring attention to it, and we shouldn't have to go to court to make the government obey its own courts.
The forum also ensures United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights are implemented worldwide. Issues discussed in side events are scheduled for the rest of the week. Angel Moore, APTN National News, New York City.
Tuesday is Federal Budget Day in Ottawa, and Indigenous stakeholders will be watching closely to see what's in this year's budget for their constituencies. Here to talk about what we may expect in tomorrow's budget is APTN Ottawa reporter Fraser Needham. Fraser, thanks for joining us. So what type of budget do you think this is going to be for Indigenous people?
Well, thanks for having me. I think we can definitely say it's going to be smaller. One reason is because last year they had the $23 billion child welfare compensation agreement, or settlement, so that was part of it. And also, they've already committed to shaving off about $417 million in savings from both Crown Indigenous Relations and ISC in the next in the coming years. And also, there's going to be about a $4.1 billion decrease in spending as some programs end. So it's definitely going to be smaller than it was last year.
And there's been a lot of talk about housing in recent weeks and the First Nations infrastructure gap. Will there be anything to address these needs for Indigenous people?
I think it's hard to say. They committed basically $6 billion for both on and off reserve housing for Indigenous people in the last couple of budgets. So, and they haven't really given any indication that that's going to change. So I don't know if there will be much new on that front. It certainly won't be anywhere, sort of in the way of the needs that have been expressed already by the Auditor General. And also the AFN put out that report last week on the First Nations infrastructure gap, which is, about $350 billion now to address it by 2030. So it's clear they're not going to make that target. So whatever they do pledge, it's not going to meet probably existing needs.
And what about funding for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls initiatives? Is there anything there?
I think the one new thing you may see there is more funding for a red dress alert. They put some money last year to sort of study it. There's been a lot of discussions. The government has sort of committed to that they're interested in putting some sort of system together. It's being studied in committee right now as to how that would work. But I think there may be some money for that because there's a lot of interest and a lot of people want to see that system put in place in Canada.
And I understand a number of ISC and Crown Indigenous Relations programs will be ending in the next few years. Can you tell our viewers what those are?
I can, yeah. There's a couple. One is the funding for Jordan's Principle. Also, infrastructure funding is going to end. And also, obviously, the Child and Family Services Compensation Agreement that's been spent already, and the Inuit Child First Initiative is also spending on that's going to end. So it's kind of difficult to say how this is all going to work out. I mean, the government could put more money toward these programs ongoing after the budget. The minister, Haida for IC, has said a number of times this is not going to affect services, that they're going to find, savings, and as these programs end in other areas like travel and attrition of employees, but not a lot of people have been convinced by that. So, but those are the programs that are supposed to sort of sunset in the next few years.
Well, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks again for joining us and filling us in a little bit today, Fraser.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
We want to hear what you think the priorities should be for Indigenous peoples in the upcoming budget. Here's how to continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to aptnnews.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A First Nation on the west coast of Vancouver Island has just released the tragic news that they have discovered suspected unmarked graves from 2 different former residential schools in their territory. APTN's Tina House has this story and a warning that this subject matter might be disturbing to some viewers.
The Haida First Nations says they are now part of the growing list of First Nations in Canada to discover anomalies suspected to be unmarked graves at 2 former residential schools in their territory. The name of the search project is called We Are Still Standing. Anne Atleo is the project manager. She says when the 215 possible unmarked graves were found in Kamloops, that inspired her nation to seek answers about the children who also never made it home.
Until we've done further investigation, we found more what you're referring to as anomalies in the cemetery there than is what is listed.
However, they are saying it's too early to release these numbers, and this is only phase 1 of the project.
And we may never find all of the children's remains. And because we're on islands, one of the very saddest pieces is that maybe some of their remains were brought to the ocean or brought to the lake at Christie. Because we're surrounded by water. Both of these schools were built on the islands that we live on.
First established in 1900 on Mears Island, the Christie Indian Residential School was closed in 1971. A Haida Indian Residential School opened on Flores Island in 1895 and closed in 1940. The experiences of the children who went to these schools was devastating for them and their families.
Helping to breathe life back into so we could be who we were created to be. We've heard so many stories of the language being quashed, diet, every aspect of our life was being taken away.
Kids from as far away as Washington State and northern BC were forced to attend both schools. The Haida First Nation received money from the federal government and crowdfunding for the project. They also utilized 3 types of the latest technology for their ground search, but it was challenging to find accurate records.
We had a fair bit of records we were able to secure from the United Church, but there was a lot of redacted information from the provincial archives, and it was late in securing some of the records from the oblates. It was a challenge, and now we've entered into agreements to access records that are not normally accessed by the public.
But for Anne and her team, listening to the oral evidence of those that survived these institutions was the hardest part of their work.
We heard really heartbreaking stories of hearing babies crying in the attic. Heartbreaking stories of children taken to the lake and not brought back.
Phase 2 of the project begins in the next few weeks, and for the Haida First Nation, they're determined to heal the past and remain strong while honoring their culture and traditions while uncovering the truth. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. We need to step aside for a short break. When we come back, we'll tell you about a historic Aboriginal title agreement for the Haida Nation. Plus, a playground project in Saskatchewan is honoring a victim of the 2022 mass stabbing attacks.
Their community is all about bringing the elders to the children and having that, bond there, and that was kind of amazing.
Welcome back to APTN National News. The Haida Nation and Province of British Columbia signed the Haida Title Lands Agreement this weekend. The historic Aboriginal title agreement shifts Crown land back to the Haida. According to a BC press release, the Haida title agreement was 20 years in the making. They say the agreement's implementation will happen in stages and provide certainty for the residents for generations. The Haida territory is made up of over 200 islands and is approximately 1 million hectares. Private property is not affected by the agreement. Haida citizens voted 95% in favor of the agreement earlier this month.
We stand before you today committed to a future that's rooted in Haida history, Haida culture, and Haida values, in upholding our inherent right and responsibility to caretake Haida Gwaii.
And we'll have more on this story for you in the coming days. September 4th, 2022 is a day no one will forget. That day, 11 people lost their lives in the mass stabbing attacks on James Smith Cree Nation and the neighboring village of Weldon. Now, a playground project is underway in Weldon to honor one of the victims of the attacks with the help of a large donation made by James Smith Cree Nation. Our reporter Rachel May has more.
The last victim in the tragic stabbing attacks was Wesley Peterson. Known as Wes, he was a longtime resident of Weldon. Everyone who knew him said he was someone who would give you the shirt off his back. The Weldon Playground project began in February to raise $150,000 to build the Wes Peterson Memorial Park. When the planning committee held their first fundraiser, the James Smith Cree Nation stepped up with a $116,000 donation to the project. Jamie Petrie is co-director of the Weldon Playground project. She says that James Smith not only provided cash, but they supported their vision for the playground.
Their community is all about bringing the elders to the children and having that, bond there. And that was kind of amazing that they understood that that's what we wanted.
Chief Calvin Sanderson of Jacassa Payson Band, one of the 3 bands that makes up James Smith Cree Nation, says their gesture is part of reconciliation and acknowledging the loss that everyone has experienced.
Very grateful to help our neighboring brothers and sisters and what they're going through too. We're all going through emotions, so we're healing, and I'm glad we got a bigger family in Weldon.
The committee hopes to have the park up and running by the end of the summer. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
We need to take one more quick break. Our photo of the day and weather are up next. Plus, a new anthology book marks a pivotal day for Métis women's scholarship.
None of the syllabuses that I had ever seen or had been given from my professors were their voices from my own people, never mind women that were Métis.
Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Just over a week ago, Shania Murdoch was enjoying a waterfront walk in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and shared with us a wonderful Saturday view. What a difference 1 week can make. Remember to send your pictures to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting off on the East Coast, 15 degrees and rain for Halifax, plus 13 for St. John's. 3 degrees in Nain, Cartwright, rainy and 6 degrees. St. Jovite, mix of sun and cloud, 9 degrees there, Quebec City, plus 8. Sarnia, rainy and 13, Windsor, rainy and 18 degrees. Kapuskasing, 9 degrees there, Wawa, sunshine and 11. Churchill, plus 4 and sunshine, Thompson, rainy and 6 degrees. Brandon, rainy and 11 degrees there, Princess Harbour, plus 10. Regina, rainy and 15, North Battleford, plus 6 and rain is there as well. Snowy and 4 degrees for Stony Rapids, Buffalo Narrows, plus 4 as well. Sunshine and 6 degrees for High Levels, snow and 5 degrees for Fort McMurray. Calgary, snowy and 2 degrees, Edmonton, plus 4. Vancouver, 12 degrees and mostly sunny, Canal, snowy and 6 degrees. Fort Nelson, rainy and plus 7. Prince Rupert, sunshine, 11 degrees. Dawson, 6 degrees and sunshine, Whitehorse, plus 8. Fort Simpson, 7 degrees and sunshine, Wati, minus 2. Paulatuk, minus 2, mostly sunny, Tuktoyaktuk, plus 4. Baker Lake, snowy and minus 11, Cambridge Bay, minus 8. Arctic Bay, snowy and minus 7, Clyde River, minus 10. A substantial collection of Métis Aunties scholarship was launched in Winnipeg last week. APTN's Sierra Bettens reports.
Thursday marked a pivotal day for Métis Women's Scholarship. An anthology featuring contributions from over 24 Métis scholars, artists, storytellers, and community leaders was launched at McNally Robinson Booksellers in Winnipeg.
Métis women have been adaptive, cunning, and essential in supporting their communities throughout history, and those skills have long extended into the Academy.
The book, titled Around the Kitchen Table, is a collection of Métis Aunties scholarship. The title speaks to the way knowledge is shared among Métis women. Dr. Laura Forsyth, an assistant professor at the University of Winnipeg's Faculty of Education, says she came up with the idea while completing her PhD, noticing a stark lack of representation.
I didn't really get to read Métis women's scholarship. Like on none of the syllabuses that I had ever seen or had been given from my professors were there voices from my own people, never mind women that were Métis.
The book has 3 sections: Identity, Women in the Academy, and Research Methodologies. Dr. Lucy Fowler, an assistant professor at the University of Manitoba's Faculty of Education, wrote an article exploring Métis research methods.
I'm so honored to be part of this volume with these incredible Métis scholars who have shaped this field for decades, and some of the new folks coming up who will continue to shape it for decades to come.
Dr. Chantal Fiola and her wife, Nikki Furland, also contributed to the book. On the cover, Furland's story quilt, titled Her Roots Go Deep, depicts the roles Métis women play in governance, spirituality, and their communities. Fiola's article discusses returning to traditional ceremonies at the time of their daughter's birth.
My piece in this book is essentially about mine and my wife's journey as a Two-Spirit Michif family, and our participation in ceremonies to prepare for the birth of our daughter, during birth, after birth, rites of passage, and some thoughts around parenting as Michif self-determination.
While the collection marks a first for Métis Women's Scholarship, the contributors say it certainly won't be the last.
We persevere and we are resilient and we continue to work and work hard, and I think this volume really shows the accumulation of all of those decades of work and labor and love for our people, because we're all doing this because we love our community.
Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Our APTN video journalist Chris Stewart was on a walk in an Edmonton park on Sunday when he and a friend spotted an eagle flying. He quickly began recording on his phone and managed to catch what appears to be a hawk attacking the eagle. The eagle manages to avoid the attack by doing a barrel roll. Eagles and hawks have been known to fight each other when they're competing for a nesting area or for prey. In this encounter, the two flew off in different directions with no winner decided. My money's on the eagle in round 2. And that's all the time we have for your Monday news. For news anytime, visit our website at aptnnews.ca. I'm Savannah Kelly. Marcy Miigwech, thank you for joining us. Have a great night.